split some of the audience.
No, there's some other
They'll
people.
come through.
Usually,
Yes. So good afternoon, distinguished participants. Allow me to stand on existing protocols. Welcome, everyone, to the CEO Roundtable on Beyond Parity, Driving Gender Inclusive Growth. My name is Sibyl Shidiak. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Gates Foundation. I sit on the Women's Economic Empowerment team, where I lead a portfolio of investments here in Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And my work focuses on increasing income for women, focusing on the nano, micro, and small entrepreneurs in the low income segments. Our strategy focuses on access to capital, markets, and leveraging partnerships with organizations like the World Bank, as well as governments. I've designed savings and credit and mobile money products for women, and currently supporting the Nigeria for Women program, as well, that's being led by the Ministry of Women's Affairs, funded by the World Bank, and was instrumental in the launch of the We policy here in Nigeria, along with its domestication efforts currently rolling out. I'm also working on digitizing women's financial transactions with savings groups for formal inclusion and credit profiles in Uganda. So thank you again for coming, for choosing this session. Today's conversation comes at a critical moment. Women already drive more than 40% of Nigeria's MSMEs, yet systematic barriers from finance to value chain access mean we are leaving billions of dollars in GDP potential on the table. McKinsey estimates closing Nigeria's gender gap could unlock $89 billion this year alone. The government has put strong frameworks in place, the National We Policy and the National Development Plan, but given Nigeria's fiscal realities, from subsidy removals to debt service pressures, this is no longer a question of policy commitments. It's about private sector leadership and execution. Our focus today: how do we move from commitment to bold, measurable action? And what role must CEOs play in shaping inclusive growth as a business and competitiveness strategy? So before we kick it off, I'd like to briefly introduce the leading women around this proverbial table. I thought there would be a table, but there's no table. So Miss Ibukun Awoshika, she is the founder, CEO of the Chair Center Group. She brings a cross-cutting perspective shaped by her leadership in manufacturing, corporate governance, and women's mentorship. She will illuminate the structural barriers that prevent women from scaling in capital-intensive industries and share proven strategies for integrating women into industrial value chains. With her governance and finance expertise, most notably as the co-founder of WIMBIZ, the former chair of First Bank, and her role on the board of 2X Global, she is uniquely positioned to address how gender lens governance and financing innovations can close the 20 billion plus credit gap for women-owned businesses. Ms. Audrey Jo Ezigbo, co-founder and deputy managing director, Falcon Corporation. As a female leader in Nigeria's oil and gas midstream sector, Ms. Jo Ezigbo represents a critical voice from a male-dominated and capital-intensive industry and can offer practical lessons for women entrepreneurs seeking to thrive in high barrier sectors. Through our conversation today, she will highlight the structural, regulatory, and cultural barriers that limit women's entry into energy and infrastructure, while sharing practical insights on scaling businesses in such environments. Ms. Princess Layo Bakare Okeu, Vice President, Lagos Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Managing Director, CEO of FAE Limited. Ms. Layo Bakare brings a dual perspective as Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry and CEO of FAE Limited, positioning her to bridge advocacy and practice in driving gender-inclusive growth She will highlight how business associations can align private sector actions with national frameworks, like the We Policy and Development Plan, while also sharing the lived realities of women navigating Nigeria's manufacturing sector. Ms. Lillian Kidane, Africa Director, Dahlberg Advisors. Mrs. Kidane brings an evidence-based cross-regional perspective from her work advising governments, multilaterals, and corporates across Africa. She will ground the roundtable in data and strategy, demonstrating the economic case for inclusion and offering proven models such as blended finance, gender lens investing, and inclusive value chain design that Nigeria can adapt and scale. And Mrs. Hudaya Fadul Abacha, founder and CEO Hudaya Couture Limited. She represents the creative sector, especially fashion and textiles, which employs millions of Nigerian women. She'll discuss the realities of women-led SMEs, barriers to finance and markets, and the potential of scaling inclusive value chains in creative industries. Thank you all for being here. Today, we'll discuss three major themes. First, the business case for gender inclusive growth, why it matters, and what it looks like from the perspectives of these women leaders. Second, breaking barriers in capital-intensive industries, focusing on high-value sectors and areas where you not only can get big returns, but you need to put in a lot of capital up front, which women frequently don't have access to. And last, from informality to scale. Looking at the creative and emerging sectors, supporting women entrepreneurs where they have thrived, but for the most part, where they've operated informally. So Mrs. Awoshika and Mrs. Lillian Kidanes, we know the economic case is strong, but fiscal headwinds mean companies must be strategic. So from your perspectives, one grounded in governance and finance and the other in evidence and cross-regional models, what's the cost of inaction? Where should Nigerian CEOs start if they want to institutionalize gender inclusion, even under fiscal constraints?
I'm happy to get started. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with all of you. Apologies, we have a strange setup, but hopefully you guys can all feel part of the conversation. I think one thing that is clear is that we are past the place of justifying why gender equality is important for business. It's no longer a moral imperative. It's no longer about social improvement. It's actually just about good business. And you asked an important question around what is the cost of not doing it? And what we do know across the Africa region and globally is that the data shows us that companies that integrate women into the labor force effectively actually generate 15 to 25% more profitability. That's not a surprise, considering that if you're trying to leverage your workforce to get optimum profitability, relying only on a segment of your workforce, if you're relying only on males, means you are limiting your own business's growth. There's a point you mentioned around where there's fiscal difficulty. So businesses that are either small and feel like gender investment in gender equity is a nice to have. We just mentioned already, it's actually just good business. But the reality is that incorporating women into the labor force and leveraging it effectively beyond the increase in profitability actually allows a business to be able to optimize on markets in a way that just focusing on males doesn't. Let me stop.
Okay, so my colleague has done a good job already of laying the foundation for the question. The reality is, in every room where you only have one side of the view, you're very vulnerable to making decision that seems right, but that is defective, simply by being blindsided. So it's important to understand that women in the workplace is key to making effective strategic decisions that will help to optimize organizations. Now, when you think about nations, and if we talk Nigeria specifically at this point, population data tells us that we're literally 50-50, men and women. I've been a business person for 36 years. I've never seen any moment when it makes sense to lock down 50% of my capital asset or resources without maximizing it and expect the optimum result. So if we're talking about growth, and if we talk about inclusiveness, inclusiveness means that we take advantage of the diverse talents and gifts and mindset and thinking that we have. And there's no way a man looks like a woman, nor does a man necessarily think like a woman. What it is not that we're asking for parity so we can compete with one another. We're asking for parity so that we can have the opportunity for the best of all our worlds to come together in the interest of national development. And that includes maximizing the talent of our women at every level, from every corner of Nigeria, because we also, based on the way we're nurtured and our exposure, we come with different value to the table. So that would be key. And when you think in terms of our women, when you nurture your female gender and you allow them to emerge, what you do is you empower the people that run your house of generations, because the women nurture your generation, and you can't give what you don't have. So a woman who is not empowered in herself, who doesn't have the right mindset and the right thinking, cannot nurture children, whether male or female, who can think right. Now, no matter how powerful a man is, he goes home and sleeps beside a wife if he has one. And even if he's not a wife, there's a woman somewhere in his life. No, the point I'm trying to make, the quality of the counsel or advice or voices that you listen to impacts the result that we all see outside, whether in the life of a man or a woman. So if you raise women who are not even capable of engaging, with the issues, whether it's with their spouse or in spaces, economic spaces, there's a challenge. And for me, finally, is at the end of the day, especially for the men in the house, we're not talking about some strange women on the street that you don't know who they are, or the ones who you meet at work that don't make sense. We're really talking about decisions and policies and actions that will impact the women that you value the most in your life. Your daughters, your wife, your mothers, your sisters, your nieces, your granddaughters, and all the women, whatever foundation you help to build or the community you help to create is where they also will be nurtured. So at the end of the day, there's enlightened self-interest that makes it necessary for us to ensure that we achieve a certain level of parity and we bring the best of all of us to the table for national development. Thank you.
And just to add to that point, for Nigeria specifically, yesterday I've heard the country's now trying to reach 1 trillion in GDP, arguably as soon as possible. If you break that down, that's at an annual growth rate of 15, 16%, which by itself is an incredible amount of growth. But you absolutely then need to unlock all of your levers for growth. And that means, as was just highlighted, you can't do that unless you unlock the role and the value of women at their optimum value.
There are two latent assets we have as a nation: women and youth. Except we unlock both at the same time and get them working. Because within the youth population, there's female. And within the national population, there's a huge population of women. Without unlocking both levers, we can't achieve the goals we think we want to achieve.
Jump in. And really Lillian, perhaps based on evidence across African markets that you work in, which are there private sector-led solutions that work best under fiscal austerity?
So first of all, Nigeria is actually doing a lot in this space, but of course there's always space for improvement. But there are some examples in countries like Kenya where they have, for the purpose of access to financing, for example, we know that it's not always ideal to ask for concessionary rates for women, because then folks think that the business case for investing in women isn't as strong as it is for men-owned businesses or men-led businesses. And so in the case of Kenya, what they did was public-private partnerships and financing to provide guarantees. So guarantee facilities that allow more flexibility for what we recognize is for women, especially at different levels of the size of businesses. So for small to medium, providing some additional support so that they can reach the barrier of access to finance, which we know is a huge hurdle. In countries like Rwanda, there were some gender-based investment and policies that were introduced that actually informed private sector. So for example, what government did was they started incorporating in their own procurement processes gender requirements. How many women do the vendors that the government procures from, how many of those businesses are either women-owned, women-led, or have women in their organizations? And what ended up happening was government introduced that within their own systems. And then private sector, we started seeing a demand from private sector businesses in Rwanda that wanted to start being able to determine things like gender ROI, gender return on investment, because they were following the lead of government in that case. And so that was in the case of Rwanda. In Ethiopia, which is a bit closer to home for me, I'm from Addis Ababa, government had invested in building industrial parks. But what the businesses in the parks started to do of their own accord was hiring more women. And they did this because they realized the women, excuse me for the men in the room, were just better employees. They showed up on time. They were more dedicated to their work. They did the work better. And these were in manufacturing businesses. And so what the companies did as an association within those parks was start creating policies within the park and incentives for those women to be able to come to work. So childcare policies, ancillary services for women, things very simple like hairdressers inside the facility, places where women could change and shower within their facilities. And so this was really allowing a more inclusive approach to have more women be able to work in those facilities than prior. So those are just some examples. But again, one thing I would like to highlight is that when we say gender equity, we really do have to think about the specific challenges women face in joining either the workforce or the business environment at different sizes. And I think it's important we talk about what is needed for women in the informal sector or micro enterprises versus those that are medium and small versus those, for example, who are large.
So the largest African gender fund right now was created by a Nigerian lady called Tokunbo Ishmael. Tokunbo and her partner, Polo Letika, who is South African, created the fund. It's a $100 million fund. A lot of the money came from a lot of the LPs. And the fear they had was that where will they find a female-led business that will be able to absorb? And that was part of why it took them so long to even raise the first fund. Now, I serve on the IC for the fund. I was an advisor in the building of the fund. And the most interesting thing is, first, we're done with Fund 1. They're right now building Fund 2. And the businesses are from Nigeria to Ghana to South Africa to countries across the region. A number of businesses that looked ordinary before, that injections of $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $8 million has totally transformed them to globally competitive businesses driven by women. And these were women that you probably know, women around ordinary people, until they had the right opportunity. And when the results, I'll tell you the story of one, Rasioye, she's in Osun State somewhere. She used to work for one of the multinationals in a department where they used to buy a lot of agro-produce from farmers. And she said she felt pain seeing what they went through, because by the time they brought their produce, it didn't meet standards, it didn't meet this, they were incurring a lot of losses. And she decided if she was going to ever do this, she would do it differently. Sultry is the name of our business. If you Google it, it's a double-digit $1 million business now. And it's one of the businesses we invest in. There's SKLD, which used to be school kits and all of that. They've gone really big from just doing uniforms, but having the right injection, the right exposure, transform this business. I could go on the number of businesses. And the sultry business is based in Osun State, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And she created like a cooperative of farmers. I don't know how many of them she has, hundreds of them now, who farm specifically for her factory processing and all of that. And she has off-takers from all the major multinationals who use sorghum and all of those products and starch that they export and all of that. The reality is, it's no brainer. You don't need any proof of concept anymore about creating the right opportunity for women to allow their vision, their ambition, and their drive to be executed properly with the right facilitation. At the end, at whatever level, like she said, whether it's at the micro, the small, because you need a pipeline. Micro feeds to small, small feeds to medium, medium feeds to large, large feeds to a multinational. Fantastic. So are there women that could be a Dangote? Yes. If they gave them the same opportunities that Dangote or anyone like him has had. And you've watched women work despite to do incredible things. And not because meant they couldn't do anything. But when you give them the tools, despite is how they will produce amazing results. Thank you.
Thank you so much for... Thank you for grounding us both in the economic rationale as well as the practical pathways. Maybe let's shift from that big picture, industry-specific reality to something that's more specific to capital-intensive and policy-driven ways of moving the needle for women. Let's go maybe to the oil and gas. So Nigeria's oil and gas and manufacturing sectors are both capital-intensive and heavily shaped by fiscal and regulatory realities. So from your vantage points, maybe Audrey, how do you see private sector collaboration with government working more effectively, given Nigeria's limited, again, fiscal space? This is becoming something that I'm mentioning in every question, because it is the reality, right? Are there models of public-private risk sharing that could unlock women's participation at scale? And then Princess Layo, as both a manufacturer and a business association leader, how can LCCI and other platforms advocate for policies, so tax incentives, procurement quotas, blended finance, that really make women-owned SMEs central to Nigeria's industrial value chain?
All right. Did you want to go first? Okay. All right. So just before I answer your questions, I wanted to say that, and this is a message for Nigeria, it's also a message for Africa in the context of the conversations we've had earlier, that what does it matter who brings the solutions? We're in such dire straits right now that we literally need everyone to bring their best to the table. And it would be quite small of us as a people to constrain our capacity for more because we are applying a negative gender connotation to issues. If we have a generation of, or I think the example I had shared at some point earlier was that if we have 1,000 women build unicorns, those 1,000 unicorns then employ both men and women that have the capacity to build other unicorns, and at some point, who started the business is irrelevant. So we need to open our minds and just look for the solutions from our people, regardless of if they're male or female. Now, when we come to the energy sector, so the conversation around capacity and financing is quite interesting because, as you've pointed out, is really capital intensive. I'm in gas primarily, and there is really nothing like a small gas project. I was in a conversation with a young lady last week, and she was talking about scaling, and she was trying to assess a fund. And I said, "Oh, how much are you trying to raise?" And she said, 2 billion. I was so proud of her, the way she owned it, because truly, until we start getting comfortable with those kinds of numbers, then as women, we don't really scale. We don't scale. So most of the intervention funds that you do see, they're talking of 50 million, and 5 million, 10 million. I mean, that's such a joke, right? It's such a joke. We're talking capacity. We're talking easily I'm sitting on the table discussing $100 billion like I own it, Now, what are the things that help? So first of all, of course, there is a lot of work being done by the government, and I have seen in the last few years a bit more engagement with private sector in stakeholder meetings and conversations. But I've also seen many times that the suggestions do not necessarily then crystallize on that side, because the outlook for government many times is a bit different, is a bit more nuanced in ways that private sector may not understand. So for me, I focus more on private, because I think that we have the capacity to create change, and it's a change that can be more systemic, and we can then give the frameworks and blueprints that government can borrow from when they see the results. And we have some examples. For instance, many of us would have heard, I think last year or the year before, I think it was when Seplat, announced their whole program around the women in business, empowerment program. They're giving loans, they're giving access to, so the policies around enabling more of their participation from a procurement point of view, invoice discounting, capacity building. And I believe that the industry needs to do more of that. Like, we need to have consortiums across the value chain that come together to create these pools of funds that women can draw from to then be able to take on the larger projects. I'm personally tired of usually being the only woman at the table when those kinds of things are happening. But we have to then create those frameworks. A big part of this also is that if we look at our supply chains, and we have to be able to see, where do we insist that we must see female representation? For instance, I deal in LPG, and I know that I've given my people a mandate. We always test it. When people are coming for, if you have a limit on available product, where are the women who are in the offtake? So those kinds of things, you're insisting that you can see that representation. But we have to be able to scale this across the sector. And in the energy space, our associations are very strong. We have a lot of them, but they're very strong, very coordinated. And I feel one of the things we can do is to then take on this role of gender mainstreaming from the association point of view, to see how we can demand compliance from our members. I spent about 6 years on the NCDMB diversity sectoral working group. And one of the projects we were working on with the NCDMB was to coordinate all the various women groups in the different multinationals, in the indigenous companies, to see how we could advocate collectively for more inclusive policies that we wanted to see practiced by our companies, but at the same time also then proposed to government as models which they can adopt. So those kinds of things are happening. And like I said, for me, and this is my personal position, that I focus more on what can we do as private sector leaders. Even as a business person, is then a challenge to everyone who is running a business, that what windows are we creating to make sure that the women have capacity? Because like I said, in energy, we're talking big bucks, and most of the time we don't see the women at the table because they are playing at the much smaller levels. Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Yeah. On my own side, I will look at policy advocacy. We are doing it in LCCI very well about women, especially men has collateral when you are borrowing from the bank. But because when we were young, we were so much in love, our men our men had it all. And now that we are matured and we want to be independent, where is the collateral? So I think driving policy towards no collateral for women, I will advocate for that. Then on our side as women too, which we too should be intentional. Personally, as a manufacturer, in my company, with due respect to men in the room, 80% of my staff, they are women. I have 185 of them. It's an open secret. You can verify. But the reason why I did that is because, you know, we are beautifully made. And when it comes to manufacturing, when they say, oh, FAE is the largest envelope manufacturer in Nigeria, it's because of our women. They are doing a lot. Thumbs up for them. You know, they know that quality must be the top notch when it comes to manufacturing. And you know, men, they are very, very restless. And the machine they use in Germany, in America, is what I use. And that's why I can compete very well in exports. That's why I can export my envelope outside the country, because women, they are very, very thorough. They make sure that, oh, all the dots and the T's, they will do it. So we women too, we should help each other by employing each other. Then when it comes to the government too, we appeal that I shared a story a few minutes ago when we were having the meeting. I was just sitting in my office and two gentlemen walked in. They said they needed some women to go to Korea and that they want to empower them. Firstly, I thought it was 419, but I jumped at it. I think we had the meeting at, I think they announced something, no, it was something Sun Hotel at Osborne Road. Southern Sun, yeah. We had the meeting and they took us to Korea. They bought the tickets. It's the government of Korea. And they gave us $2,000. I mean, $2,000 was so much to me. It's not as if I'm a pauper, but I fell in love with Korea and I started buying from Korea since then. So government too should be intentional. We need your help to make sure that women are up there. Like Mrs. Awoshika said, I mean, women too can be the Dangotes of tomorrow. And we also need independent body to measure the KPIs. How many women has benefited? How many women is doing well? And how much you've been able to give to us? Well, above all, on my final notes, we need collateral-free loans. Thank you.
There's a few themes I've been hearing. So hearing about capitalization, we heard a little bit about funds, women's voices, platforms, advocacy. So to me, it comes down to that female representation piece and ensuring that women are at the table, women are in leadership positions. I don't know, Mrs. Awoshika, do you have some insights to share with us on why that matters and how unlocking capital through women-led decisions can really help women SMEs grow?
Okay, so I serve at the global level on the board of 2X Global. 2X Global is the largest organization involved in genderless investing in the world. And they are responsible for mobilizing and creating the environment for women funding. I think enough. Okay, around the world. So one of the things we discovered, and which is backed by data, as Delberg will be able to confirm, is that one of the disadvantages that women have in being able to get the kind of credit they need for their business growth is a lot of unintended bias because a lot of the fund managers are male, and therefore 90-something percent, 98%, because it's really like 1 to 2% of funds that go to women. And this is a global statistics. So one of the actions that we've taken at the global level, and this is even specific action to Africa, because we had a bad case in terms of female-led fund managers, was 2X Global, working under a special fund for Africa, has worked with Kuramu Capital to create, I think they've had 2 cohorts now of training female fund managers specifically. Not just to train them as cohorts to support one another, but it's also to even find the funding for them to start as fund managers. It's an intentional action to be able to create the environment for more women to be able to receive the kind of capital that they need. The reality is, between intention and action, we're all more comfortable with our kinds, whether we like it or not. Even though women are good business, statistics shows that 98% of women who take a facility will pay back. So we have a good track record with that. But the question you should ask yourself is, why aren't they giving as much money to women? There are 2 sides. There's the side of you work with your kind. It's a lot easier. There's the kind of, over time, there's an advantage that's been built by so much more businesses are male-focused and male-driven. And therefore, the banks are in business to make money. They're not charity. So they're not doing anybody any favor. They're going to go where the business is. So you have to understand that as well. So there's a need for the equipping and the empowering of women with knowledge to drive the vision in a format that puts them in a place where they can attract the funding. There's also the knowledge that to drive and instigate ambition in the heart of women, because there's so many businesses as well that are driven from hobby or mid-level stage rather than from the vision of big scale. The reality is, if you go to someone who wants to make an investment and you have the right product, the right strategy, and the right story to tell, because the investor is looking for an opportunity to make money and the bank is looking for an opportunity to generate money, where you get the engagement, you're likely to find the money. So we have 2 sides. We need to work on how we think and how we approach it, and we need to work on the financial institutions as well. I'll tell you a story I was sharing earlier. When I was chair of First Bank, one of the first things I started pushing for was for us to build a product that would help women build wealth. Because I realized that there's a gap between women make money, but they consume it. There wasn't enough, yes. Well, for family as part of it and for many other things. But there wasn't a mindset that was set towards building wealth. Because wealth building is an approach to what you do. So a lot of women have controlled a lot of money over their lifetime, but they haven't learned how to retain it. So that for me was my special project. And I went into the bank saying, look, we need to find the right product to help women build wealth. And the guys were like, Chairman, why do we need to do something specifically? We're doing for all our customers. I'm like, no, women need a specific model to help them because the way they approach money is different. So we need to invest in educating them first and then showing them the pattern of how to build slowly but surely towards set goals and all of that. So when I realized there was reluctance, I said to them, okay, you know what? Let's write, give me a team, a product team. Let's write a case of what we're trying to achieve. And then let's develop a questionnaire. And everywhere I went to speak for 8 months, we distributed the questionnaires to women, collected a lot of data, came back and built a product out of that data. We then went out, had a launch of the product and all of that. In the first year, they were shocked, absolutely shocked, that they made 21 billion just from those women. And it was how many? So when they came, I was like, oh, it works. I said, yeah, but I knew it will work. The reality is on both business case. So we can't give up because this isn't emotion. It's not an emotional decision. It's about us intentionally, especially women who already sit in places, understanding the power of the position and the places you sit. Understand that seat is not just for you. It's a seat for generations of women before you and for those coming after you. And how you will use it and that position to make a business case and create value that helps to establish the value that is in women and the parity that needs to be created so that nations can get the value they seek, but from an asset that they're sitting on and not maximizing for national growth.
Very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, women are leaders of generational wealth. They can build that generational wealth. And I think we all need to be reminded of that. So thank you. We've heard from energy, manufacturing, two sectors where scale and capital are essential. But women are also transforming industries that are often overlooked yet deeply influential. So let's turn to the creative economy, where we have Mrs. Hudaya. And focus on maybe looking at textiles and fashion, which is an industry that employs millions of Nigerian women, yet most remain in informal roles. So how have you applied a gender lens in your company to create jobs and leadership opportunities? And what would it take to turn Nigerian fashion into a globally competitive, inclusive growth story?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here to represent the creative and textile sector. As a woman who built her brand from the grounds up, I know how fashion has the power to transform lives, especially for women. The creative industry has the power to educate, to empower, and employ women. When you give a woman a skill, you give her confidence, independence, and an income. That's why I've made it a point in my company to employ 70 to 80% of women from administrative to managerial positions, from our design to retail to production. I've been intentional in applying the gender lens to shift women from invisible, informal role to formal work, structured life, to contract, pay wages, and opportunities for advancement. I've trained over 2,000 women and youth through Hudaya Fashion Academy. And through our monitoring and evaluation, we've discovered about 40% of women have successfully started their own businesses. That's roughly about 800 women. And if out of these 800 women just employ 2 people, that is 1,600 additional jobs. Sorry, I'm not good at public speaking.
Great job.
Okay, so that proves that when women given structure, training, and access to funds, they multiply income. Clear evidence with that is with the right system, supportive policies for women empowerment, truly women empowerment works. And beyond training, I also like to lead by example. I want women to see that it's possible to build something world-class from scratch from Africa. The creative industry has showcased Africa's richness to the world stage. The world now is looking at Africa for beauty, creativity, and authenticity. Thank you.
And independence from our women.
So I don't know if I can just speak to
please.
this a bit. And it's a message for the women in the room and who will be listening, and indeed even the men, that when we're talking about capacity building and skill from an institutional perspective, regardless of the size of your organization, it's about your structure. It's about professionalism. It's about institutionalization. So Mr. Awoshika talked about the issue of the passion business. Even if you're doing a passion business, can you just look at the structures and frameworks that work in large entities and apply them even to that? Because you never know when your pet project turns into something much bigger than you. And many times you then close the door to the ability to then take on that skill because the structure is not there, the systems are not there, the books of accounts are not there, the records are. So it's just, we just need to do better as SMEs. Again, I don't want to, that's not a gender conversation, but because it's a panel talking about parity, I want to encourage the ladies in the room because most of our ladies are very entrepreneurial. And we see that, you know, in that MSME space, but please try to institutionalize. Many years back, in 2005 it was, I remember that was the first time I was able to access a venture capital investment into my business. And I will never forget that they said to me, they were so shocked to find the level of structure that was in the company. They thought they were coming to come and help me, only to come and see that a lot of things were in place. But do you know why the things were in place? Because every time I walked into a more established organization, I copied something. I watched how they did something and I went back to my little tiny place and said, oh, we're going to do. And many people will be like, why bother? And I'm saying, look, my picture of where I'm going is too big for me to be acting small right now. So that's the issue of having a vision of where you can go, right? Where you can go. Many times when we finally get to the tables where we're going to be discussing serious funding, the things you have on ground, plus how you're able to project where you see the possibilities, those things have a way of determining whether you get a yes or a no. Because every time you finally have a one-on-one with people that invest in your business, they will tell you, actually, we invested in you. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So can I just, oh, sorry. No, please go on. No, it's your conversation. No, go.
We women, we must train ourselves, continue training. Oh, I'm too old to learn. I still learn. So please, let's train ourselves. Then secondly, which is most important, join groups. Not communities, associations, IOD, well, of course, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For example, if you join Lagos Chamber of, I'm not marketing, but I'm just trying to, I'm trying to make a point. You know, if you are an exporter, you join the export group. If you are a doctor, you join the medical group. And if funds are coming or there's something related to training or something when it comes to medicals, it's the medical group they will take it to. So don't just join and, oh, I'm a member. No, you have to join sectorial groups that is related to your profession. That helps a lot. The printing group, join the printing group. The pulp group, join the pulp group. So that's an addition. Thank you. Please.
No, I was just going to, I mean, it relates to what both of you have said, especially what Audrey said. I was just going to give some statistics for those in the room that, look, if 90% of our productive sector is made up of SMEs, and if more than 80% of the jobs in the country is created by SMEs, and if women are the largest population within SMEs, you understand why it's really critical to unlock the SME sector and the value within it in order for us. That's where our growth is captured, is locked into. So it's not, this isn't a gender issue. This is a reality issue and statistics supports it. And that's something we need to give everything to give them the tools to build the right structure and to give the resources for them to scale in the right way so that the country can benefit from all the tax talk we had today. You know, it's all about creating the right businesses who fall into the category that are even taxable. So that's women are the most in those sectors.
Yes. Most women operating in the creative industry operate informally, without tax records, without collateral, without even bank history. And these are criteria that are needed for us to access grants and loans. So I think there should be more mentorship, training programs to educate women to scale their businesses and get structure and operate formally. Because most of these programs, interventions, they do exist, but these women don't even know about them. maybe language barrier, lack of information. So they don't even know they exist, so they can't even access it. So I think more awareness should be created, maybe in native languages, in communities, because most of these interventions, the people who benefit from it are bigger brands that are visible, that know how to access this. Brands like us. But the other brands, the SMEs, the other women that are in local communities, they don't have access to this intervention. So I think more training, more awareness should be done.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the, call to action. So what is that collective call to action? But maybe before I hear from all of you on what you think that collective call to action, what should be prioritized, I just want to recap some of the things that I've heard. So one, investing in gender is good business, and it's good business in order to reach Nigeria's GDP goals. You can't relegate women to the side, not bring women to the table if you really want to see the fiscal constraints being addressed in Nigeria. So you need to include women. Second, there are two latent assets that exist in Nigeria. It is women and youth. It's not one or the other. It is both of them. And we need to focus on how we can bring them in an inclusive manner. The private sector can give frameworks to government. I love that. Oftentimes we look at policy, we look at how do we reform certain frameworks, revise certain policies before we can move forward. Well, let's just move forward. Private sector can drive that. Private sector sometimes has the resources to do that, and they can give the frameworks to government, those blueprints, those models that government can then adopt, and then see how they can later reform some of the policies in order to meet the realities on the ground in Nigeria. I also heard that intentional action to create the environment for women to access capital. We need to create that intentional environment. So either it's women sitting as fund managers, it's women sitting in financial institutions saying we need to drive a new product that looks at certain market segments of women, and actually moving forward with bringing that evidence back to, private sector kind of just leading that change and demonstrating the models that are needed. So what are some of those other collective actions that we should all, as a roundtable, as us sitting together, what should we prioritize? And what should we call other Nigerian CEOs to lead on?
Go on. No, I was just going to say, look, it's clear that without a doubt for any company, I've served on the board of Cadbury for about 12 years now. And one of the things I learned, I can think of maybe one or two moments when a decision is being considered and how easily right thinking, smart, amazing men were going to make a wrong decision simply because there's no way they could have had a view of the matter that would have made a difference to that decision except they were women. And an honest decision, and they're like, no, we should do it. No. It doesn't work like that. And the only reason the difference that affects that decision is because you're a woman. And what that points to is the power of the diversity of the room. And so, but how do you achieve that diversity if you don't intentionally create the pipeline of the diversity? It's like saying we want to employ people and we want to make sure we always have parity in a workplace. The only way you do that is at the starting point of the interviews, have 50% men and 50% women. Finish. At every time. Populate the starting point with equal numbers. And then let merit take care of itself. If the women get through, they get through, they earn it because they're smart. If the guys get through, yes, every organization deserves to have the best for their work. But at least create a starting point that allows that equity to take place. And if we build that into multiple layers of what we do across different sectors, we will have a greater mix. There will be areas women might dominate. There will be areas men, look at how many chefs are men right now. Most Michelin chefs in the world are men. Yep. How many of your best hairdressers are guys? My hairdresser is a guy. Yeah. No, it's true. Yes, clothes. And ordinarily, those are things we would say are locked to women or locked to men. They don't exist anymore. There's almost nothing that women can't do or that men can't do, vice versa. So we need to then create the economic structures, policies, and rules that allows it. From the Cadbury side, I learned one day, there are jobs we couldn't give to women. I'm like, really? Yes, by law. By law. Because women cannot do jobs that include shifts. Yes, by law. So even though they're qualified, in certain segments of the productive system within a multinational, we cannot employ women by law. And it's still a law that exists. So there's a lot, we heard about all the updating of the tax laws. We need to go back to labor laws and check where there's gender imbalances in the law. By law, we have created inequity that we must clean up. Those are things we need.
Thank you. Excellent point. So I want to add something to what Mrs. Awoshika had said. It's one thing to bring in 50-50. That's key. But you also need to ask the same questions. Because this study that shows that it's just about 1% of capital that goes to women also has another dimension that shows that female founders are asked very different questions. They're being asked questions like, what's going to happen to your family when you're running this business? How about, what are you doing with 2 billion naira dollars?
Audrey, do you know part of why, sorry, I'm jumping in, but it's just, do you know part of why those questions come? Because the panel asking the question is usually,
exactly.
That's so once you have inequity from the setup, you're going to end up with an unequitable.
I just wanted to first say that because I've literally been in interviews where, first of all, I mean, for heaven's sake, it's a grown woman. She's being called a girl. This girl, one. So there's a construct that we need to kind of get away from. But secondly, I'm hearing questions about, so are you done having children? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? You know, it's. I mean, come on. If we want to dimension it, there are women like me that drove ourselves to the hospital to have the baby twice.
Yeah.
So from the office to the hospital. Yeah. So why are we always acting like pregnancy is a sickness? Disease. And by the way, the people acting like that were born out of pregnancy. So anyway, but the point I wanted to layer on that really is that as a nation, as a continent, we need to read the room literally. From a developmental perspective, gender issues are global, but there are nations that have shown the business case, they have shown the economic case, and we should be bold enough to embrace those models. The younger generation, I'm seeing two batches of thinking, two kinds of thinking broadly. There is a younger set that unfortunately seem to be bent on replicating the errors that exist. But there's also another set that do not stomach this conversation. They will take you on. They just believe that I'm gifted, I need to express. She's gifted, she needs. They don't even understand that we're nuancing things. So when you consider that we have a very young population, currently, I think about 70-something% under the age of 25. By 2030, that number is changing significantly to where we're having them under 18.
Yeah.
Those ones are not thinking gender. They are thinking, how do I express this thing I carry? They are not ready for all these funny structures and systems we've put in place. They just want to be. We need to read the room because there's a serious disconnect between the current thinking we have and those that we have. I mean, I have so many younger ones in my organization now. It's a different world. And you have to be able to adjust so that the business case can make sense, so that the economic case can make sense, so that the social case can make sense.
So the critical part is this social part. Because everything you've just laid out is key. And for the future of our society, we actually need to build the right structures to ensure that parity is achieved in a way that rather than allow the sexes to go to war, because the way the next generation is approaching it, the wisdom that is required to work both sides collaboratively and successfully is part of why mentorship, adjustment of policies and ways is required, so we can save ourselves from extremes. Because what is happening is the younger girls especially are running to the extremes as a means of defense. I do not want to be like my mother. I cannot take what my mother took. Now, we will have a total breakdown of our society if we do not adjust it. So we need to meet them somewhere. A lot goes to us as older women, which is why we need to mentor, we need to teach, but there's a lot on the policy side. Otherwise, our family system will break down.
There's usually when we hear these issues coming up, what they're rooted in is that there's in any kind of social behavioral change, it's often that somebody feels like they're losing something. So boys, men feel like they are losing control or they're losing opportunity if they're creating space for women. And I think as we talked about the business case, I think one of the things we need to do, so Sibyl, you had asked, what are we going to do in this room, is, to me, there's two things. One is, as mentioned, if you're in this room, you're in this conference, you are somebody of influence in whatever space you're in. And so the question is, what are you doing within your own space to bring in more gender equity? Whether it's with your vendors, whether it's with your peers, whether it's with mentorship with other women in your organization, what is it that we're each doing? And to me, that comes down to a say-do ratio. How is what we say, so we all leave this room, linked to then what we each do when we go into the next conversation in the next year, 2 years, 5 years from now? The second is you taking with us the principle of abundance. Because I think for those who are not in this room, and we were having this discussion yesterday, is men feel like somehow they have to be left out to make space for women. And that comes from a principle of scarcity. So this mindset of scarcity, that if I make room, I lose something. And again, what we're emphasizing is that this is just good business. So when you make space for women, you actually grow the pie. And I think they just haven't seen that enough. And so we do need to use as many of these examples that we see to highlight that it's actually from a principle of abundance, not from the principle of scarcity, that then we can see some of this behavioral change start to increase.
So maybe for the final, we have about 9 minutes left. I'm going to turn to the audience if there's any questions that anyone has. I'm not going to the app because of time. Whose hand went up first? I think it was behind me. Is there someone to help with the microphones?
Can I? Oh, thank you very much. And wonderful conversations. It's always, refreshing and energetic to hear this and just take it out again. My name is Odwan Yosonya. I lead the team at the MTN Foundation. And I love everything that has been said and very practical. A few years ago, we launched a program targeted at women. And it was born out of the fact that, personally, I'd met a lot of women who had been grantees, over and over again. But they didn't look like the monies, however small, that had passed through them over and over again. And we realized that the problem wasn't that the funding, there's a funding problem, but capacity was lacking. And what we found is that these women did all they could, what they knew to do, but you could see that it could have been better and bigger. It could have scaled. And so we started this program called Yellowpreneur, working together with the EDC. And we curated a program, bottom line. So they will go through learning for about 5 weeks. And then after that, applying the principles, they'll come up, and I'm leading somewhere. They'll come up with a very simplified business plan, which was also something very difficult, whether for male or female. And then they'll go into pipeline and pitch. The monies were the target. We're not targeting, big businesses, but someone who could do with a 2 million or 3 million or 5 million. But what we realized was, even at the point of pitching, it was like the women just kept somersaulting, some of them. And you would call, why are you not? Oh, they don't want loans, they want grants. And there's a reason that we were given loans. We're given loans at 2% flat. It wasn't but it was just the discipline, and they will come back and they will say, I know if it was a grant, we will do it. We had women who told us they didn't want the loans because they'd never had structure. But passing through that program helped them with a structure. So they didn't need money. So they got what they wanted out of the program. We had to reduce the terms. So, you needed 2 guarantors, we brought it down to 1. You needed to pay insurance, we took care of the insurance. But at every point, there were hurdles that the women could not just. So the last one that we opened, the bank returned to us about 300 million because we couldn't get women that will take up because of documentation. And so the reason I'm sharing this is because, yes, I know that we have, and last week there was a launch of the Gender Lens investment report and the roadmap. But there's still a lot to be done with women, from our mindset to the way that, and maybe also working on some improved type of products for women in terms of, because they may not meet the documentation and
we agree with you. There's nothing you've said that we hadn't said in our consultations. But let me tell you what I believe is the issue. And this is, what you've just said is exactly what happens to all of this international money that comes in country and thinks about the African woman as the subsistence woman at the micro level. The reality is, when you want to change a nation or change a system, you go to where you can get the biggest multiplier effect. And the multiplier effect is not at the micro. Because these are subsistence entrepreneurs. Essentially, they run their business just to eat. They do not have the mindset or the thinking of growth. And so it's not where to go. Where the money needs to move to, and I say this all of the time, is you need to go up scale. And you're talking between small and medium. And there's something in between all of that. But then you will find the women who have fire, who have the ambition, who have the drive, who have the education, but do not have the opportunity. They might even lack the knowledge, because you can have a lot of fire and passion without knowledge. However, those ones are trainable. Because they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to do it. When you show them how to, you help them to build that model, which you then fund. And they are the ones that are most likely to move from employing 5 people to 50. So it's really that we need to, the positioning of where we always attack the issue. Mm-hmm. Look, when under the last government, when they had post-COVID, had this national intervention after COVID, there was a 75 billion naira intervention. I was vice chair of the project. I was the private sector person, and the Minister of State for Trade and Investment was the chair. We had a committee of 8 or 9 of us and did the work. We had 75 billion to share. Most of these people, there were millions of people that got it, but what did they get? 30,000, 50,000, 100,000? Because that was the bulk of their capital, and it had disappeared under COVID because they'd consumed it. Now, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, so this will get them started on what to eat. But are these the businesses that will grow? No. But they're such large number that people keep thinking that's where the intervention needs to be. Now, there are different kinds of intervention. The intervention to eat is different. It means you want to make people to be able to survive. That's fine. That's a grant, because they're not paying you anything back. Then you can have the other, and you can also do the intervention at that level at absolute 0 interest, but they pay you back. Because I've tried it with I work with missionaries, and I've tried a model with missionaries before, and the money goes around and it comes back. But you create a structure and a model that works. I can tell you that model, and you'll see. But you need to go to that small and medium and intentionally find the heart and the hands and create a multiplier effect. 1,000 of them succeeding will create the next 10,000 for you. It's really about the right application of it. I'm happy to work with you for us to achieve it.
Thank you, Miss. I want to jump on this very quickly because I think it matters. Here's the point I want to make. We already have such a negative connotation around these kinds of invested in women, none of them. These are the stories we tell. And she has just put a fantastic context to it. So I'm going to ask you not to share that story again. No, hear me. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. Do you know why? Do you know why? Because in this room or listening online are other women in this group she has talked about who have scaled. Why are we not talking about those? I can tell you, for instance, life case, a young man I invested in significantly who blew it. And I saw his email a couple of days ago asking for a second chance. Do you understand what I'm saying? That the point is that there are men who are also invested in that messed it up. So when we come out and say we share this experience, and I know you did it out of this is like the real experience, but she has given you a context that I'm sure changes how you look at the situation. And I'm sure if you now go ahead and go to this higher level, you will be seeing a very different set of experiences. You're going to see people that will take 100 million from you and turn that into 5 billion very quickly. It's a different story. And my ask is that when that happens, share them at public events so that you don't color all of us with this thing. Because this is what happens. A lot of the things I hear, oh, women this, women that, I always step back and say, can you press pause? Because some of them have no gender connotation. You're just telling the story you know. I'm sitting in front of you. I took my business from 100,000 naira investment in 1994. 31 years later, it's a several billion naira company. I'm as woman as you are.
Can I add something quickly?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And also, I feel like there's not enough information and awareness out there. Like, I use MTN, I follow MTN, but I've never heard of this program. And I have hundreds and hundreds of students that could benefit from this program you have. I have students that use 2 million, 5 million and started successful businesses I can give you example of. So please, next time, like, more information should be out there so that everybody can access it and target the right people.
So I'm looking at the time. We're out of time. We're having a very great conversation. I know someone has the mic right now, but madam, if you can, yeah, we're out of time though. So maybe what we'll do is we will hang back in the room for a few minutes and we can talk a little bit more. But maybe what I'll do is just wrap us up. We've heard today that the case for gender inclusive growth is not just moral. It's economic, strategic, and it's urgent. So despite the fiscal headwinds that we know Nigeria is facing, CEOs here have shared strategies to unlock capital, redesign value chains, and champion women's leadership. So our takeaway, gender inclusion is not charity. It is smart economics and a competitiveness strategy for Nigeria's future. So thank you to our panelists and to all of you for engaging. Let's ensure the commitments and insights shared today are translated into measurable actions beyond this summit. And let's definitely continue to network and empower each other. Thank you.